Good morning. Welcome to coffee time. Let me pull these out. I don't need those. Somebody could send me a message, tell me that they can hear and see and everything's okay. I'd appreciate it. So, welcome to Coffee Time Live. I do this every week on Sunday, this time. And it's for my thoughts of the week, any events that took place. And sometimes I'll cover questions that people have asked me that I think I should share. And then the primary function of Coffee Time is the second portion of it, which is Q&A. You get to ask me any kind of non-foul question that you may have. You can ask me about Ecuador or Colombia. And the Q&As, I have to say, are probably aimed more towards the regular viewers, but you're welcome to join in and be a regular viewer. Also, before I get started, I want to thank contributors last month. In the last month, there's my Patreon account runs anywhere from 11 to 13, 14 people. Last month there were 13 people, and I want to thank you very much. They're not large amounts, but most of these people have been with me for 2 or 3 years. So I want to thank you very much and tell you how much you're appreciated. I had 5 people contribute in the GoFundMe last month and 4 people via Google Pay. You hear that helicopter? Yeah, it's great timing. It's an older Huey, and there's a military base north of me, and they have a couple helicopters, and they just kind of go out and cruise around once in a while, primarily for training. Good news? Maybe? I don't know. It doesn't faze me either way, but the rainy season is over. The downside of that is we're right now at the part where it gets a little warmer, so it's been running around 82 to 84. I think one day it got up to 86 degrees. And that will usually happen after lunch and go for maybe a couple hours. So if you're out hiking around, walking around after 12, you probably want to wear a hat, protect your head, because the sun on the equator can be pretty rough, can be pretty rugged. I got a message, so apparently this is working, which is good. I hate to, one time I'm talking away and doing all kinds of stuff here when I had the other software, and it was 2 minutes before I found out that it wasn't working. Okay, so the rainy season's over, and now we're into a little warmer climate. That doesn't mean it doesn't rain. It's still going to rain. It just becomes less, and it really is more routine. You know, it comes, late afternoon or mostly in the evenings now. Cost of living. I did this video 2 videos ago, cost of living price edition. And I got an email, and it was an insulting email. It began with insults. Like, well, my wife told me about this video and nothing was complimentary. Okay. But the comment was at length. It was at length. Unfortunately, you can't see it because he just kept kind of going on and on. I didn't mean to delete it, but I just blocked him. But when I blocked him, it took the comment away. It's and I don't really want to unblock him because, it was just garbage. It was just garbage. And the bottom line is on that email was basically I'm an idiot, which I won't necessarily disagree with. But then he says, I have no idea what cost of living means to do a cost of living video. And I pointed out to him, my first comment back to him was, I was trying to be helpful. I said, I've done a bunch of cost of living. He says, well, you've never explained what your expenses are. Yes, I have. And it wasn't in that video. And I prefaced that entire video with the title of Price Edition. And I said I was going to do prices. And the reason I was doing specifically prices is because I get asked over and over and over again about, can you just do something, show us prices on things that we would do every day. And so I spent quite a bit of time gathering that up and putting it together. He says, you know, it was a lazy man's cost of living. It was unhelpful. And the funny thing was, you know, well, this guy, you get these kind of people. And I think I even know where he came from. But you get that once in a while. It just doesn't really faze me anymore. But if you look at the comments, there were so many comments on there about, you know, it was great and really appreciate it, because a lot of people want that information. And regular viewers know that, you know, you can't put everything in one video. And so I cover things over the course of time. And you can find cost of living that covers all kinds of things. The, you know, the concept behind it I talk about that quite a bit. I talk about, you know, what it costs me to live here. I throw prices in every so often. So basically, you know, he just kind of wanted to keep going, and I didn't want to, because my life is too good to get caught up in that kind of, you know, pointless drama. You know, the poor man must be absolutely miserable if he's got nothing else to do but, you know, try to criticize. And, you know, when I cut him loose, it was because, okay, I explained everything that he wanted. You can find it in these other videos, you know, and every video isn't going to be what you want. And I explained, you know, how clear I made it that it was about prices and why. And you know, then he just wanted to come back with more insults and things. At that point, I realized, you know, he's just not going to be serious, and that's why I blocked him. I don't block very many people, but if you have nothing, you know, but hatred in your life and you have to take it out on other people, it don't come in my direction, you know. But I got another email that I want to talk about, and that was, and a lot of people are interested in this topic, even though we've kind of done this one to death too, no pun intended, is crime. Now, in this email, the reason I want to point this out is because this is kind of typical to what happens, how people get their impressions. For example, if you are in an area and you've never had any crime and you've never seen any crime, which is most, even in crime-ridden cities, that's most people. If you're one of those people, then you get this idea, this sense that it's perfectly safe. That you hear about crime, but you never see it. It's okay, and you just get that sense. But the minute you've had your, you know, wallet pickpocketed, or you lose your cell phone, it becomes the crime capital of the city or of the world, because, you know, your experience is now different. And that's how most people tend to judge things by. Now, this guy in his email, he said, well, he's only been through Armenia one time. He doesn't really know Armenia, as he said so. But he says he's got a friend who's a native of Armenia. She lives here. And she said that her son was held up at gunpoint, and his cell phone was taken, and he came home and he was all shaken and scared, which I could certainly understand that. And does that happen? Yeah, that happens. Name me a city where it doesn't happen. Go ahead. Any city. Name one. It happens. It happens everywhere, every country, every place. Maybe in North Korea. I don't know. But, you know, that's not an uncommon occurrence. But then he said, and there was a gunfight in the north of Armenia. And there were people fighting it out, you know, like in the north part of Armenia. And that would just recently happen. And he said that she was telling him that Armenia was becoming much more dangerous. And, you know, first of all, I mean, I've lived here a while. I've been here before. I lived here back when it was dangerous. I kind of know what danger is. I've got lots of friends here, and, you know, anything happens, they're certainly going to tell me about it. but you people have met indirectly because in videos I did the chief of the homicide detective chief. Part of his job is to sit in this room. They take turns at this, but there's this room that's dark and it has these banks of TVs. And on these TVs are cameras that are located all over the city. Now, this isn't a hugely heavy camera city, but they have them, and they have them at key points. And they kind of watch what goes on in the city. Uh, and as I said, they take shifts, they take turns doing that. It's like he's not locked into that all the time. But I had some pretty lengthy conversations with him uh, about crime. And the biggest thing I wanted to do when I was talking to him is to confirm or verify my impressions, what I've seen, what experiences that I've been able to gather. And he was able to do that. He was basically said, yeah, everything that you think about what's going on with the police and what's going on with crime is the way it is here. So I feel pretty confident in how I view these things. And so when he's talking about this, gunfight in the north, I mean, yeah, it could happen. I mean, North's a big area, and it wouldn't be. I wouldn't say that I would necessarily hear that, but I I know enough people. I probably would have heard of it, and I hadn't heard of it. There's a lot of police in the north part of Armenia, um, and the cameras, and it's just a very safe and secure area. Although anything could happen, I just hadn't heard of that, and I wasn't dispelling. I wasn't saying, well, your friend's making it up, because, well, maybe it did, but I was wondering, you know, I thought I would have heard about that. So then he got back to her and talked to her, and found out, well, it actually wasn't in the north part of Armenia. It was down around El Centro, and then she lives south of El Centro. He says, not in the bad parts. Well, wherever there's a crime happening is a bad part, right? Whether it's in the north of Armenia or wherever. And crime can happen anywhere. But all in all, relatively speaking, as compared to other places, not just Colombia, but other places, Armenia is a very safe place. Does it have drugs happening? Yeah. Is there shootings? Not many, but yeah, they do occur occasionally. And the funny thing here, as I mentioned this in a video before, is you've got this weird phenomenon here that if you come here and you talk to a lot of females that live south of El Centro, they'll tell you basically three things. Police are corrupt, uh, police do nothing, and there's a lot of crime and it's increasing. And you'll hear that year after year. It's a thing that they say. Whether they know of anything in particular or not is a whole different story. It's just a thing that they say, they repeat. It's kind of habitual that goes on. So if you talk to a female south of El Centro and you ask about that, that's probably what you're going to hear. I know quite a few, and I heard it from every single one, every single one. Now, when I dug a little deeper about, tell me about some specific crime that you're aware of that happened to your friends, family, whatever, then it becomes a whole different story. Well, I don't really know of anything specific. I just know that's how it is. Well, did you see it? Did you hear it? Did it happen to your cousin? Or, well, no, not really. But so you get into this thing where what's real and what's just anecdotal or what's just an impression or feeling. Now, there's a reason in the South they have those feelings, and I've covered that in another video, and I might do it in the future. I don't want to take that's a 10-minute conversation. However, it doesn't mean that crime has gone crazy. There are some barrios in Armenia, like in every city in America, in Canada. There are places in cities that you just don't go unless you're stupid, unless you're looking for trouble. And there's some here. You just don't want to go into a barrio that's Stratus 1. That's just to begin with. That's where you find, so much of the drug stuff going on. It's just bad news. And there is one barrio that's west. It's a touch north of Central, and it's west. I wouldn't really say it's the northern part of Armenia, but it's right there on the edge of Central. And that is a shanty town that's almost entirely Venezuelans that just kind of move in behind this. It's like a wall, I would say, about 10 feet high of corrugated steel. And they're behind that. They just moved into a green space and they put up these little shanties. And there's lots of crime there. And my police friend, when we were driving by, pointed that out. And uh, I almost walked in there one day, just walking around town, and something, spidey sense went off. Said, "Well, I'm not going to go there." And he says, "Yeah, that's a bad place. You don't want to go there." How big is it? It's about a third of a city block. I mean, we're not talking big swaths of area. We're just talking about these little pockets. Now, crime can happen anywhere, and somebody in the South could get on a moto with a friend and, you know, ride around Central and see somebody's pocketbook and snatch it. Although Armenia is not known for that, where that is known in some other places. But, your idea of crime is really so much of it is your perspective on it. Can you rely on the stats? Well, the stats are hit and miss, but they can give you a vague indication. But a place like Cuenca, Ecuador, which, it's funny, you have a different. I told you what they say here in Armenia. If you are a female in the South, your view is Armenia is just an unsafe place. If you're a gringo, if you're a North American in Cuenca, then it seems like most people try to claim that there's no crime and there's no guns, which is ludicrous because I documented a couple years ago in a video about in one night there were 3 people shot, and in the course of 2 months there were 5 gunshot murders in downtown Cuenca. And downtown Cuenca is the touristy area of town, and it was drug related. Now, is Cuenca crime ridden because of that? No, because crimes happen and they happen there. But it's also ludicrous to just try to defend Cuenca and insist that it doesn't happen and people don't have guns. Yeah, for people in general, they kind of took all the guns away, but the criminals still have guns. There's no shortage of guns. And so, crime does happen there. Now, if you talk to locals in Cuenca, you'll be hard pressed to meet anyone who hasn't been robbed at the very least, particularly on the city buses. If you go on a city bus, they want to hide their cell phones, because if they don't, there's a good chance they're going to lose that cell phone, maybe their wallet. Rape is a big problem. I know several women that had to fight off rapists because it was at night and they were going back home later than would be typical, and it was just more dangerous, and they had to be alone, and there were problems. So, this is Cuenca, where the North Americans just rave about how perfectly safe it is. Well, relatively speaking, it's a pretty safe city, but these things can and do happen everywhere. So what it boils down to is where in that city you go. What do if you're out at 2 o'clock in the morning versus 1 o'clock in the afternoon. All of it is basically, you want to do a risk assessment. You want to look at your demeanor, how you act. Do you look like a sheep waiting for a wolf, and you're doing it? You want to go out and get drunk and you're staggering home at 3 in the morning, or a lot of it depends on that kind of thing. But Armenia is one of the safer places in Colombia. It's pretty much known for that, and it's one of the reasons why so many Colombians look to Armenia as a retirement place, because it's not only for Colombia, it has a great cost of living, it's got good infrastructure, but it's also very safe. you know, all you ever hear is tranquilo, 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 and it is. So I just want to remind people that um, safety, when you look at a country, is so relative. And when people are considering a place like in Ecuador or here in Colombia, um, they don't know, and so they envision all these things, and it's their most important concern. Of course, once they get here and they see what it's really like, and they kind of calm down, um, you know, you're always going to be cautious, but they find out that it's really no different than any city that they would go to. Cities are where a lot of crime is. Now, in Cuenca or in Ecuador, I will caution you that most crime there actually takes place against North Americans that live in the countryside. There, it's more dangerous. Where here, that's much less of an issue, and there's reasons for that, which maybe we talk about one day. So, is Armenia um, crime rate increasing because there was a gunfight in El Centro and the lady's son was robbed and they took his cell phone? No, it's probably, I bet there's not a week that goes by. I bet there's not a day that goes by when somebody's cell phone isn't getting stolen. And like I said, you can say that about everywhere. So you got to put it in perspective. Okay, questions. And if you have any cost of living questions, that's great too. We're at the question portion. 4 question marks and ask the question. I'm going to take a moment here. There's a bunch of things been written. I'm going to take a moment and read it. So please send me your questions and we'll get on with this. Hello, Robert. Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate it. Oh my God, Kansas City. Yeah, it actually doesn't get much rougher than some areas of Kansas City. I mean, who would have thought that? But you know, we all talk about Chicago and Baltimore, um, areas of LA, but Kansas City, that's been a dangerous place for as long as I can remember. Not, again, every city, you know, you have your areas, but there's areas in Kansas City that you couldn't pay me to go through. And I tend not to panic about a lot of things. The cost of living, the apartments, the comment of looks like there's a lot of nice places between $200 and $400, and yeah, that is, you know, that is the rate in a nice area here in the north. $400 is really at the high end. You really have to push to find more. You can, like I saw a penthouse the other day that was 2 floors at the top of the building. It was next to the top and the top of the building. And on the top of the building, it opened up out into the roof, which was a large tiled patio area with its own personal swimming pool. It had trees up there. There were people that come up and manicure, take care of the trees. They take care of the pool. You don't have to deal with it. And it had the second floor. That place was 2,600,000 pesos. So quick, somebody do the math on that. Divide it by 32.50. That's been about where our exchange rate has been lately. That's less than $1,000. And this place was just killer, huge place. So yeah, you can get over $400. You can double that. You can even triple that. But it's hard pressed to find those. Apartments are just really cheap here. And that's one of the, when I say that if you're in Medellin, the cost of living is about a half of what it is in the United States. And in Armenia, it's about a quarter of what it is. One of the big factors in that, because your utilities are going to be similar, food costs are going to be similar, unless you're eating out in restaurants. But I mean, you know, normal living. is rent is a big thing. Where here you can spend $250 for an apartment that you would spend $500 for in Medellin or more. So rents are expensive there. And I don't just mean Poblado. Reales, there's some other barrios, even places like Envigado, which historically has been pretty low. I've looked at rent prices a few months ago, and I can see they're really coming up fast because places get popular. So yeah, rent is one of the sweet things about being here, and it makes a it makes a huge difference. Also, I put on 3 places. If you look at Mercado Libre website, and if you look at condos for sale, what you'll find the range. I bring this up. Somebody asked me about it. You're going to find the range approximately $40,000 to $80,000 for really, really nice and small place like mine. 2 bedroom, 2 bath, in a building with security and amenities. So it's basically around there. You can find sometimes less, and depending on where, you can find a safer barrio, maybe a little bit older building, more south of here, but still a good area. And you might find a condo there for 25,000. But if you want to live in the good part of town, it's going to be somewhere in that range. Okay, we got a bunch of things going on here. What do we got? Headed down to Armenia this Friday. How's the weather been lately? Well, you came in late on the video. The rainy season is basically over. Although it does rain, it's kind of fallen back to its usual, mostly happens at night or later afternoon, which is nice. But we're into the warmer weather, so it's been running for a few hours in the afternoon, usually like after 12 until 2 or 3. It's been in the low 80s, 82. I think one day it got up to 86. I will look back and I can only find 84, but I'm pretty sure that one day it got up to 86. And that's the way it's going to be for a while now. So we still have the nice breeze here, but when you go out, if you're going to be out in the direct sun, a lot of walking on Bolivar, there's a lot of trees and buildings, and you can walk with shade. And I don't walk with a hat because I walk in areas where I don't really need one. But if you're going to be out in a place exploring, you probably want to wear a hat, and definitely you want to wear sunscreen. Do you know the name of the modern white condo building with the garden and pool area in the central area that was featured at the end of your apartment video? I don't remember. I think it was written on there. It's just a few blocks from me. I live in La Lorena barrio, which is a very small one. A lot of people that live in Armenia have never heard of it. It's just a little small one, and it's just east of me. It's called Providencia, and that's what everybody thinks. They think I'm either in Providencia or Lirales, but I'm a little sliver in between. And it's just a few blocks. I can see it from my balcony. But if you go back in that video and stop it, you can see. Oh, I got a comment on that video. I thought it was kind of funny. The guy, he had a suggestion. I don't mean to belittle his suggestion, but I mentioned a couple times in the preface of that video to, be sure that if you really want to focus on something, stop the video. And I actually spaced these out so they were on the screen for a fair period of time because I wanted to keep it, closer to 10 minutes. And he said, it would be really good if on all these prices you would put a, text saying what the prices. Stop the video. He said it's just it took too much time. I want to look at the apartment. If I look at the price and go back, and just stop the video. So the name of that building was in at least one of those slides, probably 5 of those slides. Okay, how do you find apartments on Facebook? If you go to Facebook, and on the left side, you'll see some categories, and it'll be at the top. And one of the categories is called Marketplace. You click on Marketplace, and you dial it into Armenia or whatever area. You know, I have mine in Armenia, so every time I click on it, it's Armenia. So you dial it into Armenia, and then there's a list of electronics or furniture or whatever, and you click on rental. And that's what I did. I just went there and just pulled them out of there. They come and go, obviously. You know, some of those today are probably already rented and gone, but there'll be new ones there. You know, so OLX is a good place. Mercado Libre is a really good place. And again, the important thing is try to find uh, deal with owners directly and stay away from the agents. Gringos in the countryside. Well, that would be in Ecuador. In Ecuador, you see mostly people living in the cities, and the countryside is is for the most part sparse. Now, as you get to the coast, that's a little bit different. But most of the gringos, you know, go to the Andes area. And in the Andes area, when you drive from one city to the next, you don't see a lot of, you know, houses. And in Colombia, for example, if you go from Armenia to Pereira, it's like going in the USA. You drive down the road and there's a house and a house and a restaurant and a house, and you know it's country, but on the main road you have this. And Colombia tends to be like that. In Ecuador, it's not like that. And so if you're a gringo and you buy a property out there, it's just too tempting a target for criminals. You know, it's like, oh, Gringo lives there. He's going to have some money, and they go out there and they become victims of crime. It's just a target area because there's so few out there that you stand out like a sore thumb. And that was the problem in Vilcabamba, is you had all these gringos buying these isolated places up on the hill overlooking Vilcabamba. There was nobody around, so you know the thieves would go up there with their shotguns and you know hold people at gunpoint. A few people were shot. I mentioned shotguns because the ones that were shot with shotguns. Not necessarily just that. Like I said, the criminals have guns and pistols and shotguns, and so for a while in Vilcabamba, it was becoming epidemic what was going on, but it wasn't happening. Vilcabamba itself was quiet, and peaceful, and safe, but you know, out in the country were the targets. So that's what I meant by that. So I won't say it's unique to Ecuador, but it's far more there than it is here. I would be a lot more comfortable in places around here in the country, and not it doesn't have that same phenomenon. Okay, all I really covered was apartments and condos. Are house rentals reasonable also? Well, I did have one house in there, um, but yeah, it's very similar. In depends. It can be less, more, but I'd say it's certainly equivalent. I when I was thinking about possibly moving, I spent a couple months looking. This was when I renewed my lease in November, I think. Prior to that, I had a decision to make. And so I look at what's available. And I found a couple houses right in my area. You know, so this is where I want to be. So right in my area. And the prices were about the same as I was paying, you know, for this apartment. On the other hand, when you have a building, you have security, which is nice. It's useful for more. For example, when I got the Amazon in, they just take it to the security desk. I don't have to be there. I didn't have to sign for it. You know, so there's conveniences beyond just you've got a security guard for security. And so I've grown to appreciate, I like that. I like the fact that I can walk out of my apartment door and there's a chute to throw my garbage in. I mean, it's just so simple. I just don't have to deal with any of it. I like that my water has a filtration factory in the basement because they have to pump it. They just include in that filtration so I can drink the water right out of the tap. And you can in most places, particularly in the north. But I like that little extra level. After all the things I had to do in Cuenca to make sure that I was getting good water in the north, but I like that little extra level. After all the things I had to do in Cuenca to make sure that I was getting good water 10 years ago, would I ever want to live in a high rise building in the heart of the city? Absolutely no. I mean, I was a country boy. I grew up in the country. You know, the wilderness was my toy. The, it, I was so far from being a city person. It's just, it is so practical, so convenient. It my entire life gets to focus on good things and not chores and repairs and all the things that renting or owning a house includes. You have to negotiate the level of maintenance you get, by the way. It's just not a given. So if you rent a house or an apartment, uh, something goes wrong, let's say your bathroom sink starts leaking, there's a good chance that'll be your responsibility. So just kind of keep that in mind. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lauren lives in La Lorena. Very funny. How hard is it to find a place to rent with two small dogs? Is pretty much every place will accept pets. As a matter of fact, on most of those slides, you'll see at some point, I had to scroll and take more screenshots, but there's a place that'll have like amenities, and a number of them showed up, uh, pets welcome. So is it hard? No, it's almost almost every place will accept a dog. Now, if you've got a, and even pit bulls in some cases, although some places will want to limit the size of the dogs, and some places don't want a dog that they feel might be dangerous. So, you know, they might not want to have a pit bull there. Remember that apartments here are not apartment buildings with, you know, somebody controlling those, and they're owned by individual people. So in my apartment, they're called condos because of that. But in my place, I have an owner, and the one next to me has a different owner, or maybe it's the owner that lives there. So they don't. I've yet to see a building that was actually apartments, and that building managed those apartments. They're all individual owners, and you rent through them or through their agent, which I recommend not to do. Well, what I'll say about living in the country is don't ever assume anything, no matter where you are. You always want to take certain precautions. You know, you want to, you know, have an eye to your security. You want to think about contingencies. If something goes wrong, what can I do? Do I have a landline beyond also cell phone? You can get alarm systems, private security, to watch your place or to be available to come to your place. So depending on where you are, what's going on. But if you're out in the country, I would say take precautions, but that's it's really kind of common sense. And in the U.S., again, there's not a lot of difference in what you would do there versus here. The only difference there is if you've lived in a place for a lot of your life, you become very comfortable with it, and you just kind of instinctively know what to do and how to do it, where to go. If you go to a place that you've never been before, then you have to learn kind of a new set of rules. You can't translate your other set of rules to this new place. And in the U.S., you can't translate upstate New York to Omaha, Nebraska, out in the country there. You know, you have different sets of issues and different sets of rules. So you have to learn those. Um, but if you take reasonable caution, I would have no problem living in the country other than the things that I've said. I've become spoiled. And it's funny, in Ecuador, that wasn't the way. I mean, first I lived in a high rise and I really, really disliked it. It was very uncomfortable. Then I lived out in that small town, 2,000 people, Hirom. And that's when I lived in that huge house, 5 bedroom, 5 bathroom, you know, up on the hill, looking down on everybody. It was spectacular because you know it was so peaceful and quiet, and that town there was no crime. The last crime in that town was 4 years prior, and the guy was literally tarred and feathered and run out of town. He was a lifelong resident. They just didn't tolerate it. Uh, and some small areas here are like that. And then I moved back into Cuenca because of an internet issue. I had to, so I moved back into Cuenca, and there I lived in a house in a very nice neighborhood near the river, and I really enjoyed that. And so the least enjoyed place was high rise, and I thought I would never live in one again. But I came here, and it was the first thing that opened up that I wanted. So I said, all right, well I'll take the higher because there's so many of them here. I thought, I'll try a high rise again, and then in a year when my lease expires, then I'll change. Well, in the year here, it's a different situation than it was in Cuenca, and the benefits here are so good of living in a place like this that I no longer have desire to live out, in the countryside, which I just never would have thought I would say those things because that's what I've always loved. But now I love where I am. I just can't help it. So, do you see yourself buying something at some point rather than renting? No. Uh, when you have a place where rent is so inexpensive, what would be the point of buying? I personally, I don't see it because here's why. First of all, financially, I'm no longer in that situation. My savings got wiped out when I was ill. So I thought my life was set. You get sick for a few years, and I just got cleaned out. So I live basically month to month to month. But that aside, that would have no bearing on my decision to buy. If I wanted a hacienda out in the country, there's plenty of them for rent. Uh, and rents, like I say, rents are so inexpensive here. I just don't see the point because if one lesson I could take away from my last 5 years of life is that you can't count on anything, staying the same. And if something comes up and I need to move, now what? I got to wait for a buyer. What if I don't get a buyer? I mean, if you've got all the money in the world and those things don't matter and it can sit empty, then I would go for it. But for me personally, I wouldn't do it. I would never ever buy property in Ecuador. It's just so problematic. You can't even be sure that you own the property. It's so most times you buy a property, you're going to own the property in Ecuador. But there's plenty of instances, not half, but maybe half, maybe 25%, where people buy a property and then find out year, 2, 3 years later that somebody's put a claim on that property because all the paperwork wasn't done correctly, and somebody now has a claim on your property. It's a mess there. Real estate is a mess there. Plus, you've got a government that, it depends on any given day which direction they go, whether property ownership even has meaning. So I would never do it there. They're way overpriced, and consequently, you can't get rid of them. So you buy property there and you get buried. Here, um, it, for a lot of people, dropping $40,000 and never having rent on a nice condo in a nice building could be very attractive. I see that. I get it. So I can see where that would make sense because real estate here can be so inexpensive versus a place like Ecuador. So I'm not saying it's wrong for everybody. I'm just saying for me, it doesn't make sense because I would always worry that what's around the corner and what if for some reason I have to be somewhere else. I can't picture it now, but I couldn't picture the things that happened to me over these last 5 years either. There is no way on earth I could have guessed. I would not have guessed any of the things, even my financial issues last year. There's no way I would have guessed those happened. So I guess I'm a little gun shy on it right now. Mixed fuel, previous life you were a pilot, awesome. Fixed wing or rotary? Well, my job in the Marine Corps was crew chief on CH-46 helicopters. And crew chief is the helicopter. You're responsible for the helicopter. You're assigned to the helicopter. And the pilots and co-pilots would come and it's like they rent your helicopter. They come and go. But you have the helicopter, it's your responsibility. That was my job. And I liked it, and I flew a lot because most of my time in the Marine Corps was overseas, and overseas, some of it was during war. I was in the airlift, for example, out of Vietnam. Some of it was in peacetime. After Vietnam, I was still in for a couple years after that ended. But the thing is, when you're overseas in the Marine Corps, your flight time and activities are pretty much the same, war or peacetime. Here in the United States, it's very different. It becomes like a 9 to 5 job. But overseas, uh, you're flying or related to flying 16, 18 hours a day. I got to love flying. I got thousands of hours flying, and I got quite a bit of stick time on helicopters. During Vietnam, the pilots were very concerned if they got shot or they could no longer fly, that somebody else would be able to fly them home. And so they would want you to have stick time. So I got quite a bit of stick time during those years. After Vietnam ended, that actually went away. But I got a taste for flying, and so when I got stationed back in the United States, I was overseas in the United States for a year, then I went back overseas. When I was back in the United States, I decided to get my private license. And so I would rent Cessnas, go out with flight instructors, and get my license that way. And then through the rest of my time in the Marine Corps, and then after, I would go out and fly. I haven't flown in, I don't know, probably 15 years, but for quite a while, I was really into it. Yeah, living in the country, you almost have to have a car. No, you have to have a car. You have to have transportation if you live in the country. You might even get buses that go by once in a while, but you can't really rely on them. You don't want to. I shouldn't say you can't rely on them, but it's difficult to know when they're going to come through. Is what I mean. And you could sit there for an hour, waiting for a bus and walk away to pee and come back and the bus already went through. Now you got to wait another hour. It would definitely be problematic, especially, what if you injured yourself and you have to get to a doctor real fast or something. Here in the city, you have instant transportation. I can have a taxi. As soon as I walk out my door, I can have a taxi. There's so many taxis here. Then you have phone apps and things like that. People are crying that Uber's leaving Colombia. Well, it wasn't in Armenia anyway. It doesn't faze me. Besides, taxis are legal where Ubers weren't. But yeah, you definitely need to buy a car. On the other hand, buying a car is cheap. And 2 videos ago, I showed a motorcycle for, what was it, like $400 maybe. It was a couple years old. I showed a used car that was $2,000, I think, something around there. That was a Volkswagen Golf. That was the year 2000. And then I showed a Chevy that was, I think, a year and a half old, and that was just under $8,000. So cars are not very expensive here. They're relatively inexpensive. And getting a driver's license, it'll cost you about 1,000,000 pesos. So it's going to be 300 and something dollars. Now that's not just for the drivers, that's for the class. So you'll take about 2 weeks of driver's classes. It'll be in Spanish, but the thing is, DMV and the driving schools are virtually one and the same. They will issue you driver's license, so they have a stake in you passing. So they're going to make sure that you pass. So you just go through the driving school, you take the test. They're holding your hand the entire way. After the 2 weeks, here you are. You've got your driver's license. You're good to go. So you can buy a car and have your driver's license for $2,000-3,000, even less if you need to. A motorcycle under $1,000. So that's pretty reasonable. So if you're going to live in the country, yeah, you're definitely going to want to do that. Do you need a Fyodor to rent an apartment in Armenia? You mean a guarantor? I think that's what you mean. Well, technically, yes. If you go through an agent, absolutely. That's one of the many issues of going through an agent. I will not go through an agent, and that's guaranteed. You will need a local person to guarantee your lease. Yeah. Um, for me, I actually know some people that would do that, but I couldn't bring myself to that. But if you go through the owner, no, you don't have to do that. I paid a month and a half deposit. We negotiated that. We negotiated the price of the rent, and it was my signature only. And that's what you do. And my friend Justin downstairs, the blind man that moved in, um, it was the same thing. Nobody's guaranteeing his lease. He dealt with the owner. It's a different owner, but in the same building. So if you do things the way I do it, no, you don't need a guarantee, and no, you don't have to pay 6 months deposit. Like in some places here, want that. My guy asked for that. In Medellin, it's becoming routine, 3 to 6 months deposit. I'm not going to do that. So you deal directly with the owner, and you just bypass all those things. If you have an agent, you're stuck with it. You know what my view here in Armenia is there are so many places. It's renter's market. There are so many places to rent. If you deal with the owner, and if that's been sitting on the market for a couple months, I look specifically for one like that. The guy's going to be hungry because he's paying a mortgage, and they're going to do everything they can within reason to rent. And so that's what I targeted, and that's how I got here and got it the way I got it. I don't look old enough. Well, unfortunately, I am. It's starting to show up here. I even think I'm. I don't know. My hair looks a little. I've been wondering lately. Am I starting to bald there? I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting paranoid. But I'm 66, and I'm definitely old enough. I can tell you that for sure because I was there. It's something you don't forget. And I'd explain another one. I was even at Woodstock. Okay, that's all the questions for today. Thank you. As always, thank you for those who contribute. I couldn't even see today, so if anybody did, I really appreciate it. There's, I've gotten some emails asking me how to go about it. Just look at the section below the video. You open that up, and it's got all kinds of information. A lot of things that people ask me over and over. What equipment are you using? What software are you using? Didn't you say you had a link for booking.com where I can get a discount? All of those things are down there. How to contribute or where to contribute. Links that'll save you things on various. I've got probably 4 or 5 links that'll save you money when you come down. All the equipment that I use, software, things like that. So that's it. Thank you all for today. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next Sunday.